أصعب إشي إني لما أحكي سيرة أمي وأبوي، لأنه هدول الأسماء اسم أمي واسم أبوي يعني بيكون الواحد بده يعيط، بس أنا يعني قوت قلبي بديش أعيط.
That was 11-year-old Dareen, whose parents were among 70 family members killed in an Israeli airstrike. Let that sink in for a moment. Today we focus on the most vulnerable victims, the children stuck in this war. I'm Anelise Borges, and this is The Stream. And here to discuss the situation of thousands of children who survived their families and are now alone in a world of violence and destruction are my guests today. Fadi Elhindi, humanitarian worker from Gaza and the Palestine country director of Taawon, a welfare and development association. Dr. Ghassan Abu Sittah, a British Palestinian surgeon who has been volunteering in Gaza for years and entered the Strip when the current war started. And Steve Sosaby, the co-founder of Heal Palestine, an NGO dedicated to helping children in the occupied territories. Before we start our conversation today, though, here is more of Dareen's story in her own words.
أنا امبارح حلمت ببابا، يعني بابا شايفني أنا واقفة وقاعدة بجري مع صحباتي بجري وبابا مبسوط ومن كتر الفرحة يعني صار يعيط، فإنه بابا شافني قال لي يا دارين شايفة لو كنت من قبل سمع كلامنا بتعملي تمارين كل هلا أنت بتمشي من زمان إلك، كان هلا إلك أكتر من شهر بتمشي. قلت له صح كلامك يا بابا، وأنا آسفة إني ما كنتش أعمل تمارين، بس الحمد لله إن شاء الله هفك البلاتين وأرجع أمشي وأحلم فيها. بدعي لهم كل يوم يعني، وإن شاء الله قبل عمليتي لما أفك البلاتين هدعي لهم قبل ما أفك البلاتين. قبل الحرب كانت حياتنا حلوة، كنا أنا وبابا دايما نطلع وماما وإخوتي، كنا يعني دايما مبسوطين. كل يوم يعني الحمد لله أشوف صورة أخويا اللي استشهد بضلني أعيط، يعني إنه كنا قبل إنه نتقاتل ونفس الوقت اللي بنتقاتل فيه نتصالح أنا وأخويا، يعني دائما كنا حبايب. وأجت الحرب ودمرت حياتنا، قتلت كل الناس، قتلت أمي وقتلت أبويا وقتلت أخويا وقتلت ست أمي وست أبويا، يعني كل هذا 70 نفر كلهم استشهدوا، إخوالي وعمامي وخالاتي وإخوالي يعني كلهم استشهدوا، يعني ما ضلش عندي ولا حد غير عمين وخال واحد. وأنا يعني كل ما الصحافة تحكي معي بعيط، بس أنا اليوم ما بديش أعيط لأني أنا فرحانة، وكمان لما أعيط بكون هيك بحرق أهلي، فإني أنا هلقيت فرحانة إني دفك البلاتين وأرجع أمشي وركبي رح يتنوا وأصير يعني زي البنات والأطفال، أمشي وأجري وأطلع ويعني الحمد لله.
Very difficult words there. Fadi, you are from Gaza and you only recently left the Strip. Have you met many children with stories similar to Dareen's?
Well, actually, after what Dareen said, there's nothing else to add over that. But just you can say, Dareen is amongst hundreds of children in Gaza who have lost all of their family members and are left without extended families to care for and to nurture them. For me and for Taawon team, all of the Taawon team, including myself, have seen numerous cases similar to Dareen, Alma, Salah, Ahmed, so many others as well, similar to this case, unfortunately.
Steve, you founded the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. You've been working with Palestinian children for some 30 years. What are you hearing from your teams on the ground in terms of the situation, in particular with orphaned children?
I think the whole orphan situation is a larger reflection of what's happened to the entire Gaza society, the complete destruction of the family structure, of all institutions, of the entire Gaza Strip, of course. And what we're seeing with the destruction of the families is that I think the number of 17,000 is probably pretty conservative and not really the true number of the orphans that exist in Gaza. But the bigger question that we all face is what's next for these kids. There's no institutions locally in Gaza that can operate to support them. And they're obviously in a survival mode right now with the ongoing effort to starve and, push the Gaza people out of the Gaza Strip. There's literally thousands of orphans there who are just living without any support on the streets, who don't have, who are living under food insecurity, who don't have access to health care and have no family structure to help care for them. Our teams on the ground are finding them and trying to get them shelter, trying to get them some kind of structure in which they're getting support that they need. I was in Egypt just last week and visiting injured kids in the hospitals. I found several children there who are orphans, who had suffered significant injuries, were evacuated in very critical condition, and now are in hospitals without any family members around them. They're completely without any support at all. Recovering from their injuries. What happens to those kids? What's happening in 5 years to these orphans or 10 years? The trauma, the lack of institutional support. This is a huge question that organizations like ours have to face, and we're ready to take on this challenge, but the challenge is growing every single day with the ongoing killing of Palestinian civilians and the continuing increasing number of orphans every single day in Gaza.
Indeed. We're going to go into these issues that you bring a little bit further throughout the show. But Dr. Ghassan, I wanted to hear from you because you entered Gaza on the 9th of October last year. And I wanted to hear if you have a story that has stuck with you in terms of these children, unaccompanied children, that you might have helped treat.
So it was really from the beginning of the war that we started seeing this phenomena of the wounded children with no surviving family. And the reason is that the way Gazan society is organized is that extended families or clans, or what we call in Arabic al-Hamula, live in neighborhoods. And the Israeli strategy of wiping out whole neighborhoods meant that there were children whom not only the immediate nuclear family was killed, but actually the whole extended family, cousins and grandparents and uncles and aunts. And by the time Shifa Hospital had been completely surrounded, there were 120 of these children just in Shifa Hospital. And what's even more devastating is that some of these kids were so young that we didn't even know their first name. When I had to move to Ahli Hospital, when Shifa was surrounded, I remember a 3-year-old boy whose name we didn't know, who I had to do amputations on his upper limb and lower limb. And he was one of many kids that you would see taken out of the rubble with no one left of the surrounding family. And as Steve pointed out, this is a serious phenomenon, not just the Palestinian children inside Gaza, but now that hundreds of these children are now being sent abroad for treatment. In the absence of a supervising welfare body, a Palestinian body that oversees the child protection issues of these children, ensures that they're getting the right treatment, ensures that their welfare is being protected.
Absolutely. The amount of danger and risks that they face going forward is enormous. And we're going to get to that. But you just mentioned there a new term that was coined. In any conflict, children tend to bear a very heavy brunt. But this being the most destructive military campaign of this generation, it has been particularly devastating for children, as we've been hearing here, so much so that this new term has been coined. Take a look.
During the hearing in the ICJ by the South African team, the Irish attorney shed light on the WCNSF, which is an acronym that is only used in Gaza, which means wounded child, no surviving family. This term is only used in Gaza, specifically to kids who are injured and lost their immediate family.
Fadi, Steve mentioned this before, but I wanted to hear from you. Do you know if there's any kind of infrastructure still standing to respond to the needs of these children? I don't know. Are there safe houses where people can house them, or are there orphanages?
Well, before the escalation, there were 4 orphanages operating in Gaza with a capacity around 2,800 child, while unfortunately now it is still operating and functioning right now as either being totally or partially destroyed, so that none of the orphanages center right now operates. And unfortunately, in the meantime, actually there's no safe place for all Gazans, not only for the orphans as well.
Sure. Steve, what are your teams able to do at this stage on the ground? Are they able, as you said, to at least reach these children, feed them, identify them, come up with, I don't know, at least official figures?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, our team on the ground right now is in that process of identifying especially the most at-risk kids who have absolutely no families at all that Dr. Ghassan mentioned. These are the kids who need immediate attention, even during this acute phase of ongoing bombings and starvation that the kids and the population in Gaza is undergoing right now. Our teams on the ground are in the process of identifying these most at-risk kids and trying to put together an institutional response. We're looking for properties that we can bring into under our control and start providing shelter, food, and other basic humanitarian support to help these kids survive, get them off the streets, and give them some kind of holistic approach of love and compassion to help them survive this phase until we're on to the next phase of rebuilding Gaza, God willing.
Of course, all that in the midst of bombardments and killings. It is unbelievable. While researching for the show, and that's why I wanted to address this a little later, while researching for the show, we came across a number of campaigns to adopt children from Gaza. Here's the take of Melissa, an adoption educator, on the dangers that such initiatives can pose. Take a listen.
Adopting kids from a literal place that is experiencing genocide, where thousands and thousands of people and children are being unalived, is not you coming to save the day. It is you further causing harm to people experiencing unmentionable pain and trauma. Because I guarantee you the $10 to $20 or even $30,000 that sometimes international adoptions cost that you would spend to save one child would do much better good if it went to those children to help get them resources to find their family or extended family and friends or people in their culture, in their country.
Dr. Ghassan, you mentioned this briefly before. What is your take here in terms of the dangers these children are facing, even when they do get out of Gaza and are able to find medical treatment, for example? They still face very serious risks.
These are the most vulnerable of the vulnerable group. So when we hear of Palestinian wounded children being sent to Holland or Italy or Switzerland or any manner of countries. And this is going to be much more once the ceasefire, whenever it happens, is announced, because we know that half of all of the wounded in Gaza are children. So once these children are then sent, there are 2 main issues. One is the straightforward child protection issue. These children don't have adults that are legal guardians to look after their welfare. These children cannot make their own decisions. There are certain dangerous and difficult decisions that need to be taken with regards to amputations, with regards to surgeries that are going to be made on behalf of these children who are unable to make these decisions. And then there's the clinical governance, what we call clinical governance, and the quality of care. A lot of well-meaning hospitals will take children who are not equipped to be treating children. And that's the risk that we are also running. And that's why it is critical that a Palestinian supervision or governing body or welfare body is set up to ensure that we don't lose track of these kids as they are being sent across the globe for treatment, and ensure that they're getting the right treatment.
Steve, that is precisely a very difficult point, isn't it? Because who are the authorities that are going to be able to now step up and be responsible for some kind of institutional support to these children?
Yeah, I think Dr. Ghassan raises an amazing point now, which is that kids going outside for treatment, and many of them are orphans or have suffered some kind of a significant loss of family members, are in many cases going without family members and having these very critical decisions being made for them by people that may not be qualified. And they may be going to places that, as he mentioned, that are not qualified to treat them. There definitely needs to be a centralized governing process to ensure that these kids are well taken care of. There isn't one in place. I've took the first injured child out of Gaza back in 1991 during the first Intifada, a triple amputee, and have taken over hundreds of kids for free medical care. We always return them to their families. The point is that they go and get medical care, and all of this is in absolute consent with their families, whether they're traveling with them or not. But I think in many cases, we're in a very difficult situation. So, for example, just 2 weeks ago, we transferred a 16-year-old girl who had been burned on 60% of her body. And in a life-threatening situation. I mean, she was dying, and she was in a hospital in Cairo. We flew her by air ambulance to the United States, where she's in an intensive care unit and recovering right now with her older sister, who is legally responsible for the decision-making because her family was not able to get out of Gaza or were not able to travel with her. Those are tough decisions, and it's the responsibility of the organization that's sponsoring these kids for medical care to ensure that the family's aware every step of the way what's being done, that they have the decision and they have the control of that, and that these kids don't just disappear. That's actually the biggest risk that we're facing right now. All of these kids that have traveled to foreign countries, who's monitoring them? Who's responsible for them? Are they getting the care that they deserve? And if so, how is that being documented? And are they going to return, and where are they going to return to? These are huge questions. There's no central government that's in place that can monitor this right now, and that there's no centralized organized body that's ensuring that these kids are being properly cared for. And I think this is a very serious issue, not only for the orphans and the kids that don't have parents to make these critical decisions for them when it comes to their medical treatment, many of them suffering, as Dr. Ghassan mentioned, permanent injuries, but also over the long term, like what's going to happen to these kids as they need treatment in the future? Who's going to make these decisions for them? Who's going to support them? And who's going to make sure they get the best care possible? We're ready to step in and help in this process with our experience of over 30 years doing so. But we also, this should be a Palestinian-led process, as Dr. Ghassan mentioned. And unfortunately, right now, it's very chaotic. There's people coming in and want to help, good intention, but maybe not making the best decisions or not having the experience to make the best decisions. And that can do more harm than good. One more point I want to mention on the issue of adopting kids, if you don't mind, because I get asked that question every single day, multiple times. People want to adopt, and I understand that they mean well. And many of them are Palestinian families, Arab families, where the culture and where the religion would stay same. There wouldn't be any kind of effort to change things for them. But the issue here is that there is no government on the ground in Gaza that can facilitate this, even if it was possible. And there's a lot of religious and political issues that come into play when you talk about adopting kids. No, we all want these children to have lives, to not be institutionalized, and to have the love and compassion that children need to grow old and to get through this very difficult process, the healing process of losing their family members. But there needs to be an organized structure in place if this is going to take place. We want people who want to help to do it in the right way, and as was mentioned before, not to do more damage than good. There are 17,000 orphans in Gaza, but as Dr. Ghassan mentioned, there is a family structure in place in most cases where these kids can get support. And groups like Taawon, who Fadi represents, have a very organized orphan program that ensures that these kids get the material support that they need. The issue here is the long-term support that these kids are going to deserve, the mental health issues, the material support, and the opportunities to live and to heal and to have lives that they can hopefully recover from this absolute trauma and this complete destruction of their lives.
Absolutely. I mean, apart from the fact that sorry, Dr. Ghassan, you wanted to weigh in. Please go ahead.
So historically, in 1976, when Tel Zatar refugee camp in Lebanon was surrounded, and then there was a massacre of over 3,500 of its inhabitants, there was the first phenomena of a large number of Palestinian orphans. And at that time, there was the PLO. And the PLO set up a body called Bayt Atfal al-Sumud, the House of the Children of Steadfastness, that cared for these. And they were, in the hundreds rather than in the thousands. But this is what is required at the moment. Just as these children are orphaned, the Palestinian people are orphaned in the absence of any meaningful representation with the demise of the PLO. Absolutely.
Fadi, how do people go about helping these children? I imagine, as Steve mentioned, there are so many well-intentioned people around the world who might be wanting to help. Fine, adoption, clearly not an option right now, especially in the midst of this chaos and death and destruction. A ceasefire is needed, but beyond that, what can people do if they're watching us right now and would like to help?
Okay, now the answer stems from our experience in Taawon and just like supervising and supporting an orphans care program since more than 15 years. The type of the program or the approach of the program is kind of more comprehensive and complementary services that are provided to the orphans in terms of health services, educational services, humanitarian aid, psychosocial support, social care. Taawon previously used to support or to sponsor more than 4,000 orphans before the current aggression or aggressive attack into Gaza. I do agree with what was said earlier by Steve and Dr. Ghassan that adoption is not a solution. And the most important thing is to invest in human capital and consider orphans as the human capital of the Gaza and to invest in them in order to rebuild Gaza and building back better of the Gaza and Palestine as well. For that reason, we in Taawon, in response to the question and coming back to the question, we in Taawon actually has launched a new program to provide complementary services, comprehensive services and program for the orphans, which we do estimate it's the number around 20,000 orphans, as Steve said that the number 17,000 is conservative, so that we have launched our new program to support orphans in Gaza after the war stopped. And in the meantime, right now we do provide the orphans' families, and those orphans still left without families as well with some of the humanitarian aid. But we do plan, and we consider that the plan of supporting orphans after the war stopped is needed, while the needed efforts actually should be more collective efforts from Taawon and all other working organizations, HEAL, Ghassan, Sittah, and all of other working organizations, so that kind of collective efforts is needed in the meantime, and also in the future planning as well to invest in orphans to have access to their rights.
Dr. Sittah, as someone who's just, again, come out of Gaza and was there treating these children, what is your message today to the world in terms of the needs of almost an entire generation that is going to have to grow up without their mothers and fathers?
The multiple layers of human suffering that make up this genocidal war is sometimes overwhelming to fathom, whether it's the orphans or those orphans within the orphan group that are wounded, or those who have still a parent, but the parent is now critically wounded. The most important thing is that this genocidal war is stopped, and those who have committed these heinous acts are brought to international justice. And that the aim of this war, which is to turn Gaza into an uninhabitable place, and which is what the Israelis hope to achieve even after a ceasefire is finally announced, is defeated. We owe it to these children, we owe it to their martyred parents to rebuild Gaza and rebuild the lives of people and the lives of children in Gaza, so that once this war finally is over, we can set about rebuilding what the Israelis have attempted to create, which is an uninhabitable place that is devoid of its population.
Dr. Ghassan, Fadi, and Steve, I want to thank you all so much for joining us here on the stream today. And thank you all for watching. Don't forget to stay in touch with us online and send us your comments and suggestions on social media. You can use the hashtag or the handle AJStream. We leave you today with words of resilience and hope in the future from Dareen. I'll see you next time.
أنا بدي أرجع على غازة وأضلني فيها دائما، لأنه غازة هاي بتكون بلدنا وكل واحد بضل متمسك في بلده، فإحنا أهل فلسطين ومتمسكين ببلدنا، فإنه مستحيل نتخلى عنها ولا يوم ولا نص يوم حتى ولا دقيقة، مستحيل نتخلى عنها.